Human rights is, geez, that's a good question.
Human rights. Oh, that's a tough one.
Wow.
Права человека.
I don't even know how to give that a definition.
I would probably have to do a little bit of homework or something.
Any right that I think just as a normal, human,
The rights that humans have.
Oh, that's a very large debate.
Menneskerettigheder kan betyde mange ting.
Tú le puedes preguntar a 20 personas y te van a dar 20 diferentes opiniones.
Non saprei, è una domanda complicatissima.
Yes, we just take them for granted that they're there, but we don't even consider what they are.
Human rights are the rights you have simply because you're human. It's how you instinctively expect and deserve to be treated as a person, like the right to live freely, to speak your mind, and to be treated as an equal. There are many kinds of rights. Most apply to a certain group. But human rights are the only ones that apply to absolutely everyone, everywhere. That means kids, old people, poor people, basketball players, garbage men, rappers, teachers, Africans, Indians, Albanians, Christians, Muslims, Kabbalists, atheists, your mom, your dad, your next door neighbor, and you all have the exact same human rights. In other words, they're universal. But the question remains, what are they?
Name the human rights?
What the human rights are?
The right to live.
Equality between all peoples.
Right to religion, the right to...
Is there supposed to be a list somewhere I should be aware of?
According to the United Nations, there are a total of 30 human rights, which are usually lumped together and called simply human rights. They're all listed out in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is the world's most widely accepted document on the subject. But it was a long time in coming. At first, there were no human rights. If you were in with the right crowd, you were safe. If you weren't, well, you weren't. But then a guy named Cyrus the Great decided to change all that. After conquering Babylon, he did something completely revolutionary. He announced that all slaves were free to go. He also said people had the freedom to choose their religion, no matter what crowd they were a part of. They documented his words on a clay tablet known as the Cyrus Cylinder. And just like that, human rights were born. The idea spread quickly to Greece, to India, and eventually to Rome. They noticed that people naturally followed certain laws, even if they weren't told to. They called this natural law, but it kept getting trampled on by those in power. Not until 1,000 years later in England did they finally get a king to agree that no one can overrule the rights of the people, not even a king. People's rights were finally recognized, and they were now safe from those in power. Kind of. It still took a bunch of British rebels declaring their independence before the king got the point that all men are created equal. Which isn't to say he liked the idea, but he couldn't stop them, and America was born. The French immediately followed with their own revolution for their own rights. Their list was even longer, and they insisted that these rights weren't just made up. They were natural. The Roman concept of natural law had become natural rights. Unfortunately, not everyone was so thrilled. In France, a general named Napoleon decided to overthrow the new French democracy and crown himself emperor of the world. He almost succeeded, but the countries of Europe joined forces and defeated him. Human rights was again a hot topic. They drew up international agreements, broadly granting many rights across Europe. But only across Europe. The rest of the world somehow still didn't qualify. Instead, they got invaded, conquered, and consumed by Europe's massive empires. But then a young lawyer from India decided enough was enough. His name was Mahatma Gandhi, and in the face of violence, he insisted that all people of Earth had rights, not just in Europe. Eventually, even Europeans started to agree. But it wasn't going to be that easy. 2 world wars erupted. Hitler exterminated half the Jewish population of Earth in horrifying Nazi death camps. And all told, 90 million people died. Never had human rights been so terrifyingly close to extinction. and never had the world been more desperate for change. So the countries of Earth banded together and formed the United Nations. Their basic purpose was to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person. But what were human rights? Were they the proclamations of Cyrus, the natural laws of Rome, the declarations of France? Everyone seemed to have a slightly different idea of what human rights should be. But under the supervision of Eleanor Roosevelt, they finally agreed on a set of rights that applied to absolutely everyone. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The French concept of natural rights had finally become human rights. So, in summary, at first, only a few lucky people had any rights, until one of those guys decided, hey, other people should have some rights too, which was great, except not everyone agreed. And it only took a few thousand years of fighting and declarations and more fighting until everyone finally agreed that human rights should apply to everyone. And they all lived happily ever after. Except for one little problem. If people have the right to food and shelter, why are 16,000 children dying of starvation every day? 1 every 5 seconds. If people have freedom of speech, why are thousands in prison for speaking their minds? If people have the right to education, why are over 1 billion adults unable to read? If slavery has truly been abolished, why are 27 million people still enslaved today? More than twice as many as in 1800. The fact is, when it was signed, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights did not have the force of law. It was optional. And despite many more documents, conventions, treaties, and laws, it's still little more than words on a page. So the question is, who will make those words a reality?
I have a dream today.
When Dr. King marched for racial equality, he was marching for rights that had been guaranteed by the United Nations for almost 2 decades. But still, he marched. When Nelson Mandela stood up for social justice in the 1990s, his country had already agreed to abolish such discrimination for almost 40 years. But still, he fought. Those who fight today against torture, poverty, and discrimination are not giants or superheroes. They're people. Kids, mothers, fathers, teachers. Free-thinking individuals who refuse to be silent. Who realize that human rights are not a history lesson. They're not words on a page. They're not speeches or commercials or PR campaigns. They are the choices we make every day as human beings. They are the responsibility we all share to respect each other, to help each other, and to protect those in need. As Eleanor Roosevelt said, where, after all, do universal human rights begin? In small places close to home. So close and so small that they cannot be seen on any maps of the world. Yet they are the world of the individual person, the neighborhood he lives in, the school or college he attends, the factory, farm, or office where he works. Such are the places where every man, woman, and child seeks equal justice, equal opportunity, equal dignity without discrimination. Unless these rights have meaning there, they have little meaning anywhere.
Hello and welcome everyone, and thank you for attending. My name is Aaron Carson, and I'm the Vice President of the DC chapter of Youth for Human Rights International. In honor of Black History Month, we have a very exciting event prepared for you today. We have 2 keynote speakers joining us who will be sharing some fascinating aspects of American history that you may not know. Feel free to type any questions you have directly into the comments section below throughout the event, and we will attempt to answer as many questions as we can. We have a tight schedule, and in order to hear from everyone, we will do our best to answer questions at the very end of the event, okay? To start, I'd like to share a short public service announcement regarding human right number 1. We are all born free and equal.
Can you tell which of these children was not born free? Can you tell which of these children was not born equal? Can you tell which of these children does not deserve to be treated with dignity? We can't either. Human right number 1. We are all born free and equal. What are human rights? Find out at youthforhumanrights.org.
I love that video. All right. Our first guest speaker is Christopher King, a motivational speaker and human rights activist. Christopher is distinguished by his significant contributions to the Black community, specifically founding the Gentleman's Course, a nonprofit organization educating youth on etiquette. He is the president of the Florida chapter of United for Human Rights. And finally, he is also the grandson of blues legend, B.B. King. Please join me in welcoming Christopher King. Hey, Christopher.
Hey, Aaron. How are you?
I'm doing great. How's your day going?
It's going wonderful. Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
So thank you for your gracious introduction. And to all those viewing and watching, thank you for tuning in from wherever your respective place is in the world today. As he mentioned, my name is Christopher King. And I am the president of and founder of the Gentleman's Course, as well as the president for United for Human Rights Florida and Youth for Human Rights Florida. So thank you all again for attending. And I'm going to be speaking with you today simply on a simple topic that is a hot commodity. If you look at the title of our event, From the Past to the Future, it makes you think where we've come from to where we are today. And I'm 39 years of age, and simply put, I have to consider the past and how I live in this future. And where we've come from segregation to desegregation to now we're talking about equity, inclusion, and diversity is the current topic of how we're sourcing the value of our current state of people and what we're calling equal in a corporate world, in a society, in a social setting. So we're going to address this from the perspective of Article number 2, which is no discrimination. So if you're not familiar with your 30 human rights, I encourage you all to please self-educate yourselves on your 30 human rights. There are yours for you just because you're born. So to read that, it simply says, the principle of non-discrimination seeks to guarantee that human rights are exercised without discrimination of any kind, based on race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth, or other statutes such as disability, age, marital and family statutes, sexual orientation and gender identity, health status, place of residence, economic and social situation. I think that about covers everything. Basically, what that says is we as a people should treat each other as simple human beings, regardless of our differences. We shouldn't have to highlight a difference in each other to base our judgment on whether or not I should be able to treat that person equal. It should all be eliminated. All cards off the table. That's a human being, whether they're black, whether they're obese, whether they're white, Hispanic. It should not matter. And how we treat and operate with, around, against, for, and to them. Word choice is very important in today's society and how we garner people. So I encourage all of you to listen today to the words that we deliver, and hopefully it will give you a better understanding and some clarity on how we should treat people. I've always looked at treating people a little far past how we say treat ourselves as we want, treat others how we want to be treated. Because sometimes that statement alone, some people like being treated badly. So we got to be careful on how we word things. So just to look past that, we want to make sure we're not discriminating against anybody. And how, when I look at equity, inclusion, and diversity, we're going to address this simply from, by definition, understanding what each part means. Equity is the quality of being fair and impartial. Impartial, meaning, okay, some or no some, all or just a little. Impartial, I don't want to be unfair to anybody. I don't want to do to one as I want to do to the other. So we want to make sure we're being fair to everybody, right? Everybody gets the same part. Equity, or in other words, let's just say equal. So inclusion is the practice or policy of providing equal access to opportunities and resources for people who might otherwise be excluded or marginalized, such as those who have physical or mental disabilities and members of other minority groups. Why do we have to group people? Why we can't just see people as being simple human beings? When I look at equity and inclusion, I'm looking at it from the beginning is that in order to understand how to include people, you must first separate them, so we know what we're including. And in my eyes, that is a violation. We should not have to identify who people are, what they do, and their choice of life to see how see best fit to include them in what we feel is okay. So we must be careful that in our inclusion, that we're including people as briefly as possible, that they are just human beings in the focus of exactly who and what they are, which is human. And let's just leave it at just that. Now, diversity, last but not least, is the practice or quality of including or involving people from a range of different social and ethnic backgrounds, of different genders, sexual orientations, etc. Once again, we're allowing ourselves to categorize people into what we feel is okay or a social standard to make them equal in our treatment, whether it be a job, whether it be in selling them something at the same price that we sold somebody else. How can we differentiate mankind just to justify our service to them and call that equal? If you come to me and say, Mr. King, can I buy this from you? And then your friend or somebody you don't even know comes to me, I should give them the same price that I gave you, regardless of who and what they are. We're in a society where we've grown from different cultures where homosexuality was not approved on or shunned on, to where now the LGBT community is a part of our social standard. But why should people have to identify publicly who they are or what they are in order to be treated equally? A person should be able to just live their life in peace. But we call it diversification or diversity, to include them and allow the same opportunities to be available to them as it is to us. But who is a us and who is a them? Aren't we all human beings? Aren't we all one race of people? Whether we be Chinese, whether we be Korean, Japanese, African, African American, Caucasian, Hispanic, Puerto Rican, Dominican, Colombian. Everybody is a human being. We can go as far as Russian, Greenland. I mean, it's so many different people that live on this planet. But we focus on differentiating each other against our own selves, when we should truly be focusing on just simply living and being happy. We are a human being and we are happy to be on this planet. for the temporary amount of time that we will be here, make the best of it. Let's enjoy humanity in its entirety. Let's enjoy just being with people. We shouldn't have to figure out a way or a method of how we include people to be diverse and equal. Every time I see the three words, I find a problem in just providing clarity for myself and understanding that this is where we are today in 2022, when Dr. Martin Luther King marched 40 years ago. And here we are today. I was correct, 60 years ago. It's back in the 60s. We are today still having these same conversations. 1945 is when the United Nations was found, and simply it took them 3 years, a conglomerate or a group of people that were diverse, were not equal, and where some were not even included. Because out of the many countries that are in our world, only 192 countries are members of the United Nations. So how can we see fit to come up with something in that short period of time to say all people are equal? We should all govern ourselves accordingly. This document is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, signed in 1948. This was the base that we should govern ourselves by, how we treat people. Why we can't use that document and just simply let that be our justification. Everybody has the right to fair and free housing. Everybody has the right to marriage, regardless whether they're transgender, whether they're gay, whether they're heterosexual. It's your right to marry who they see fit. Now, with respect to cultural boundaries, we keep it within the human race. As long as people are happy, then let them be happy. We've found ways to include the differences in equity, inclusion, and diversity to as far as how we buy a home and who can buy a home. Some things are afforded to others that are not afforded to most. It's not just in the workplace. It's not just in your social community. It's not just on your street. It's everywhere that we look at how we include equity, inclusion, and diversity. So let's always keep the focus of understanding that these three words, as important as they are, if not understood properly, can be three dangerous words in our culture and our community. I find myself always talking to different individuals in different spaces of life, whether they be young children, youth, or adults. Some of them coming from broken homes, some of them coming from well-off homes. Literally can see the differences right in front of my face, but I must treat them with the same sense of urgency that they need assistance and help, regardless of where they come from. Some of them may need some clothing, some of them may need something simple as a diary, but some don't need anything but a conversation, an ear to listen to, somebody to give them clarity of why life the way it is today. And I feel we all have that human right number 29 of responsibility to not discriminate, to treat everybody equal and fair. It's our responsibility to provide the sensible understanding that we are here together for as long as we will be here. We have come very, very far from where we were way back then, and to be properly correct, where our ancestors were. We come from a culture of people that have been through so many different things when we talk about Black history. People that were tortured, people that have lived through pains, survived being shipped across thousands of nautical miles of water. Some of them witnessing relatives and family and children dying in their own arms, and they still pushed on. To come to a land where they were whipped, beaten, and forced to do things they would never do on their own judgment, and they still pushed on. They survived and pushed on. They ran, they fought through swamps and slavery, and they still pushed on. My point is, they never gave up the fight. 2022, and we're still in the fight as a community and as a culture. So yes, the language and the words have changed to how we understand what the fight is, to be equal, to be included as a culture of people, to be diverse or to be diversified against. We as a people can still be unified to stand the front table, to stay in the fight and never quit and never give up. We have a battle that is at its highest peak in my eyes today. We as a culture, we still fight against each other. We still kill each other. Against all odds, we're fighting against a society that still yet does not accept us no matter how many feats we accomplish, whether it be in athletic field, whether it be in economics, whether it be the presidency of the White House. We're still viewed upon as not equal. We've held every seat, congressional, to Senate, to House, politics, corporate CEOs, inventions, military. We are in every facet of our nation, and we're still not seen as equal. We're still going to face people in our culture that do not like us as a Black community. But we as a people cannot let that deter our fight, our position, our eagerness to accomplish growth, whether it be within ourselves or growth as it is to other people. Because sometimes forgiveness is not for them, but for us. So I encourage you all, as I close, that take equity and be equal for yourself as you are to people. Include yourself in things that you might find is not diverse. Be the person, be the action, be the message, be the vision, be the words that actually we can be whatever we want to be, whenever we want to be, wherever we want to be it. Stay in the fight, ladies and gentlemen. And I applaud you all for the work you have done, are doing, and will do. From the past to the future, I'm Christopher King, and thank you for allowing my words to touch your ears today. Back to you, Aaron.
Thanks so much, Christopher. It's so interesting to note how we focus so much on differences today. And it's so, we're getting some feedback there. We focus so much on differences today, and you know, we forget that we are all human and that we are, we should be treated equally. You know what
Correct.
I mean? And it's as simple as that. So it's really refreshing to hear what you had to say.
It is. You know, naturally, we're born the same way, natural birth.
Mm-hmm.
We're all going to die the same way, in a casket, in a grave. You know, some may die in a hospital, some may die of traumatic experiences, but we all end up leaving and coming in this world the same way. People used to say, well, I put my pants on one leg at a time, just like you. And my son surprised me the other day, and he put his pants on 2 legs at a time. He said, Daddy, I'm different. I'm like, okay, I'm going to remember that one. Because in essence, there are differences that we can't control, because the differences are choices, and we have to learn to respect people's choices.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining, okay?
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Before I go on, I just want to point out that everyone who is joining today, please tell us where you're coming from. So far, we've got people joining us all the way from India, here in Washington, D.C., Clarksburg, Maryland, Los Angeles, California. We have people coming from Florida. We even had someone from Uganda, East Africa. I think I saw Washington State. Definitely, please continue to comment on where you guys are coming from and joining us from. Sacramento, California. Awesome. Thank you so much for participating. We absolutely love to see that. And please continue to ask any questions that you have for any of our guest speakers or for myself in the comment section, and we'll take those up at the end, okay? All right. So now we will see one more human right video. This is on human right number 2, Don't Discriminate.
Joe. Stevens. Aaron. Okay. I'll take him right there.
right, take care.
Give him.
All right. Next, we will hear from Bernard Lafayette. Bernard was a co-founder of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, a leader in the Nashville Lunch Counter Sit-ins, a freedom rider, an associate of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and the national coordinator of the Poor People's Campaign. Please join me in welcoming Bernard Lafayette.
Thank
Hey,
you very
Bernard.
much. Yes.
Of course. Thank you so much for joining.
Good. I really enjoyed King. It was just wonderful. I think that is so important. What you're doing is extremely important. So I want to start off by thanking you for making this possible for people to share. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you so much.
Okay.
It's all yours.
Yes. Well, first of all, I want to say that we've been able to use the technology of today to share experiences from yesterday. And I think that's incredible and very important. So what I want to do is get to the questions and answers as soon as possible, because that's what's important to me. What's on others' minds? What are they thinking about? We're here, and I'm talking about those of my generation, for short period of time. And we can share what we have while we're here. So that's why I'm grateful for this opportunity. Thank you.
To join you
So-
from Tuskegee, Alabama.
And I'm joining you from Tuskegee, Alabama. I can look out my window and see, Tuskegee University. And the house I'm in right now was built 90-some years ago, at 94, by Booker T. Washington's office boy. So I feel very elated, by the way, to be in the space where I am and to be here at this time. So very quickly, I've been asked to talk about the Selma movement. I was assigned to go to the Selma movement by James Foreman. And a couple of things in terms of facts that I want you to know is that Foreman was at Roosevelt University in Chicago. I was one of those who went there to recruit him to come and work for SNCC in Atlanta. And he did. He was a faculty member there. And so we brought a person who we felt had some experience. Even though we were students, we didn't hire a student person to run SNCC. We wanted someone who had some experience and somebody who could help. Just like, for example, we have Bob Moses, who came to Nashville to train us, the SNCC group, and Diane Nash and John Lewis and Jim Bevel and all of us there were part of that. Catherine Brooks, yeah, I wanted to make sure. Angela Butler, yeah. So what we did was get people who had some experience and people who had appreciation for working with students. So everybody who's grown may not necessarily, work well with students. Everyone who, even in college and universities, but we got the best that we could find. Now, of course, I want to quickly say that Ms. Ella Baker was the one that established SNCC down at Shaw University in Raleigh, North Carolina. And all of us went there, and that's how SNCC was formed. And Marion Barry, by the way, was the first chairman of SNCC. Yeah. But moving fast forward for the time being, I was in Chicago doing the Selma movement. I laid the groundwork for the Selma movement, and I had some unusual experiences there, and I could talk about those later during the question and answer period. But I was not there at Bloody Sunday. At Bloody Sunday, I was in Chicago, laying the groundwork for the Chicago movement because Martin Luther King was going to move north. Because some people thought that segregation and discrimination only existed in the South. We thought about the atrocities of the South and the way people live. But Martin Luther King wanted to expose the fact that the segregation and discrimination that people of color experienced was not simply relegated to the South. So I wanted to move ahead, just like I moved ahead in Selma, Alabama. I left and went to Chicago, and I was working for the American Friends Service Committee, the Quakers. Now, what I realized is that in Chicago, you had organized gangs, organizations, institutions, and they were oriented towards using force and violence to express their concerns. And they're also to maintain their power. That was the way they had power. Didn't have a whole lot of money and could make decisions and things affecting the lives of the people, but they had power. But they used to fight each other. So I knew that they were capable of doing that because I used to belong to a gang in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. In fact, I was a gang leader. Yeah. Okay. I knew Leon Sullivan, participated in the boycott as a gang leader. In Chicago, during this particular time of what they call the Selma movement and the Selma March across the bridge, I was in Chicago training gang members in nonviolence. And once I trained them, I sent them to Selma. So the marshals that you saw in the Selma March, those marshals were from Chicago. Some of you sometimes see in museums a photograph with this, leader, a young leader, going into Montgomery, Alabama, with an American flag holding right in front of, and behind him is Martin Luther King and Mrs. King and Abernathy and Abernathy's wife, Martin Luther King. So we had, he had a tam on really, and it was backwards. He was dressed in ordinary clothes, wasn't dressed up with suits and ties. Okay. His name is Lamar McCoy. Lamar McCoy was the head of the Vice Lords in Chicago. He, was the one that supervised the marshals. Now, I joined the march after Bloody Sunday, and they continued to march on down. And of course, our marshals were there. And I couldn't fly into Montgomery because there were too many flights and no space. So I had to fly into Birmingham. And you know who picked me up in Birmingham, Alabama? That was Mrs. Viola Lauso, the white lady who was killed in the Selma area. Well, it was actually in Lowndes County, yeah. She drove people anywhere they had to go. And she was the one that was assigned to pick me up in Birmingham. So in that same car that she was killed in, that Wednesday before the march was over, I rode in that car with her all the way to from Birmingham to Selma. So the only time I was on the front line of the Selma March was one time when we, midway to March, I had to run to the front of the line, and there's a picture of me, and I had to tell them to slow down because they were going too fast for the people behind. I marched in the rear of the march because that's where people are usually attacked in many cases, okay? Not law enforcement, but sometimes law enforcement will attack people from the rear. And James Lawson taught me this, how important it is for people who are marching not to have to worry about watching their back. So I was always the back watcher, in the back watching, so we would know how to respond in the most effective way. So with that, I'd like to move on to the role that I play. Martin Luther King and I were in Memphis together. In fact, I was there in the Lorraine Hotel that morning of his assassination, okay? And I met with him because I was doing a press conference for him in Washington, D.C. And so I had a press statement prepared, and he had to review it before I left. So that morning, I left out of his office, out of his hotel room in Lorraine Hotel, 306. My room was 206. And when I read the press conference statement to him, he approved it. And as I left his room, he said, now, two things now. You go ahead and get started, and I'll be along later. Start the Poor People's Campaign. Because he had appointed me the national chairman, okay, of the Poor People's Campaign in 1968. So the next thing he told me, as I put my hand on the doorknob of the door there at the Lorraine Hotel, he said, now, Lafayette, and he called me Lafayette because another staff person was named Bernard Lee, who was from Montgomery, yeah. And he said, our next movement is going to be to internationalize and institutionalize nonviolence. Institutionalize. Okay. Well, we know the history there, and he was assassinated, and that kind of thing. We had to do the Poor People's Campaign. We had to finish the garbage workers strike and get recognition. And we moved ahead and got that Poor People's Campaign started for Martin Luther King. After the campaign was over, what I did was work with going back to school, getting myself ready, because I wanted to make sure that I could fulfill Martin Luther King's idea of learning how to institutionalize nonviolence. And that's basically what I do now, is train leadership. I make sure that if we're going to have a successful campaign, and if we're going to do it effectively in establishing institutions. So it's not just a demonstration over some issue, but it's actually the opportunity to make sure that we continue to accomplish the goal. Now, the first thing you must do with leadership is help them to understand the basic principles. And then the next important thing would be the strategy. And we must institutionalize that so that people will go on and be able to move ahead effectively. And we've done this all over the country. So what I do is basically focus on training leadership. For example, if you're going to provide leadership, the first thing you've got to do is be able to be very clear about the goal that you're trying to accomplish. The goal. You can't just have any concern and protest about it and carry a sign. As leaders, you have to be clear about the goal. And the next thing that's important about the goal is you must look at the goal in a universal way. For example, you have to be more of a cosmopolite rather than a xenophyte. I learned that from Chet Pierce, uncle and professor was at Harvard University. You can't look at truth just in the narrow sense. It's like looking at the North Star and thinking that you understand the sky. Okay? No. You must look totally at all the stars that relate to these different stars. And so you look more broadly at issues and the relationship. And so you see a picture rather than a dot. So that's more important. Constellations are more important than just simply one star. So you see how they relate to each other. So a lot of the problems that we deal with, even now, and you see it on television, there's a relationship between those different issues and problems, even today. So as we move forward in the movement of the 60s, we had to focus maybe on a specific issue, but it had to be related to a larger problem. And the goal, number two, always had to be focused on how do you bring more people together into a coalition. Yes, Montgomery Improvement Association was not one organization, it was a coalition of organizations. MIA, when I was in Chicago, okay? You had Al Raby, and he was focused on CCCO, Coordinating Council of Community Organizations. That brought together labor unions, churches, and all other kind of groups, okay? Civic groups, teachers, okay? Like Ben Willis and all that kind of stuff, who was the superintendent of schools. We were able to bring all the different organizations together to focus on the issue of racism in the public schools in Chicago. The open housing movement in Chicago. All those were related because where you lived had to do with where you, went to school. Yes. So all those communities were separated. Mayor Daley had separated them. In fact, Mayor Daley had a coalition. Yeah. Mayor Daley, he had Republicans in his organization. Ward committeemen. It didn't matter. So he brought them all together. That's why they call it the Daley Machine. Okay? But they had separate communities, and each of those communities represented different ethnic groups. Yes. And I was involved with helping to recruit Jesse Jackson to get involved in this thing. He'll tell you. Okay. In fact, he was the first staff person for CCCO. Al Raby hired him, to do that. He was good at it. I can tell you a lot of things about that. So the point I'm making here is that the next thing in terms of leadership is coalitions. The other thing you have to do is have the training and discipline that you need to make sure that you respond in the most effective way to those who oppose you. How you respond to your opposition will determine the effectiveness of your being able to achieve your goal, your response. Because when people try to attack you, it's for a purpose. They're not having no sports activity. When people attack you for doing what is right, what they're trying to do is discourage you and convince you that what you are trying to accomplish, although it's the right thing to do, is not possible. Maybe the right thing, but they're trying to say to you, no, you cannot achieve that. And so they use all kinds of forces to try to convince you. It's how you respond that will make the difference. And one of the things you have to do when you respond is you have to respond in a way to try to reach your opposition and your opponents, win them over. It was Napoleon who said, no revolution has ever been won except that you're able to win the support of the majority. No revolution has ever been won. Martin Luther King drew from many different sources. Yeah. I was really impressed with the way Martin Luther King approached things. He drew, look at his staff. There was Hosea Williams from the military. He was an officer in the military. Martin Luther King recruited Hosea Williams. Okay? Jim Bevel. Jim Bevel had been to the Navy. In fact, he was a gunner on a submarine ship. Jim Bevel. Yeah. So my point is that when he reached out and recruited people, Martin Luther King wanted to learn from many different sources. Yeah. So my sending gang members from Chicago to the Selma March to be marshals, okay, was like boot camp. I wanted them to have some experience in exercising nonviolence in atmosphere of violence. Some had already had their teeth knocked out, their eyes cut and everything, but so they were capable of responding or either receiving the forces against them. But they knew how to now, as being in nonviolence training, how to respond in a different way. Because they were clear about the goal they were trying to reach. And they knew that they could not reach that goal if they were going to implement with the same kind of behavior they did prior to their nonviolence training. One thing they had that was very important was courage. You need that in nonviolence. In fact, in nonviolence, you need more courage. Your courage must overcome the fear. So that's what you do in training. So I won't take up too much more time now to tell you about that, but I do want to tell you that we're talking about global when Martin Luther King say international. Okay. Okay. You're looking at somebody who was kidnapped by the FARC. Yeah, the FARC in Colombia, Latin America. And obviously I was able to get them to free me. I don't want to have to go into the details of that unless I get questions, but there are many circumstances where we worked with the Nigerians. We trained over 40,000 Nigerians, and that helped to reduce the violence that they were experiencing at that particular time. Oh, in Colombia, we trained people in the prison. Yeah, Colombia, that's where we train people. We have people now who have training centers in Nigeria who were former inmates. And these former inmates were the policemen and guards. Yes, even the guards were inmates. And when they returned out of the prison after having the nonviolence training, they set up training centers outside of the prison to train former inmates and gangs in nonviolence. Well, a lot of things that people don't know, but you can't tell it all. But I have a book that's on the Selma movement called In Peace and Freedom, My Journey in Selma. Peace and Freedom, My Journey in Selma. Katherine Johnson helped me write that book because she could type 180 words a minute. I had to do it in a hurry. But my point is, that gives you sort of the essence of what that training was all about. And the on an international level, I have also many documents and that kind of thing as well. David Jensen and I developed that and materials and stuff like that, and Charles Alphen Sr. and Mary Lou Finley. Okay, and we got others who I can't name all the people who've helped develop this material, and Jonathan Lewis, for example, and Ruth Henry, and I can go down the list from one end to the other. Here in this country, people have made a big difference. And by the way, I was, as Barack Obama says, I was the roommate of John Lewis at the American Baptist Theological Seminary in Nashville, and we were able to get the first Freedom Ride actually occurred, the modern Freedom Ride in the 60s. It occurred in 1960, the Christmas holidays of 1960. John Lewis and I decided to integrate the bus coming out of Nashville, going home for Christmas of 1960. That's the Freedom Rides. We also did the sit-ins in 1960, and it was a Greyhound bus station had a lunch counter downtown, so we desegregated the bus station. So we say, well, since the bus station is desegregated, why don't we do the buses? Okay, and we did that to make sure that people understood that you can't stop with one issue. That one issue has to reflect the change that you want to see happen throughout the system. You might work on issues, but you got to make sure that you don't forget that those issues have to lead to systems. And the most important system that we have to work on changing is a system of thought. My last point right now is that we must focus on young people. It's not the experiences that makes the person, it's their interpretation of those experiences. That's why the school system is so important. You may have experiences throughout your life and all day long and everywhere at home and playground, but your interpretation of those experiences many times have to be in your institutions like churches and schools. So you have to give the young people an opportunity to share how they interpret what they are experiencing, like right through this period. We can't just leave it to young people, okay, to be on their computers and stuff. We got to talk.
Thank you so much, Bernard. I 100% agree. And I love the way that you pointed out how you can't just stop at one victory. You have to keep those victories going, and you have to set new goals for those leaders, or the movement's just going to kind of stop right there. You know, you just kind of have to keep that momentum going, or we're not going to get to that, you know, platform or that plateau that we're trying to hit. Well, definitely stay on, because I have some questions coming in for you. So please hang on with us, and I'll bring those up in just a few minutes, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Awesome. Thanks so much. All right. So at the moment, I want to remind everyone that they can continue to ask questions utilizing the comments feature. So if you do have any questions for Bernard or Christopher King, please go ahead and add those to the comment section. I have some questions that have come through to me directly that we will be taking up shortly. But in the meanwhile, please continue to post any questions that you do have in the comment section. All right. Next, we're going to play one last video, and this is on human right number 29, responsibility.
Good morning. I'm here to read you your rights.
My what?
We are all free and equal. Don't discriminate. You have the right to life.
You have the right to life and to live in freedom and safety.
You have a right to education. You have a right to your own things.
You have the right to social security. You have the right to play.
You have the right to democracy. You have the right to asylum.
You have the right to take responsibility.
And no one
and nobody can take these rights and freedoms away from you.
Why are you doing this?
You have a right to know.
I absolutely love that public service announcement, because it's actually the reason I decided to get involved in human rights education in the first place. I saw the 30 public service announcements, or PSAs as we like to call them, in the early 2000s after they were produced. And I realized that we all share some responsibility in spreading this message of equality and peace to our youth if we ever expect to make any significant change. Youth for Human Rights International has been working tirelessly for the last 20 years to reach youth all over the globe and to show that human rights can be a fact if we all work together shoulder to shoulder. The DC chapter has participated in numerous school seminars, national night out events, human rights trainings, and even concerts on our national mall to spread our message. While we've recently turned to virtual platforms due to COVID, we've never stopped working. It is more important than ever today that everyone stand up for human rights. First, you must know what human rights are. All member countries of the United Nations have agreed to uphold the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, yet many people around the world do not know that they have 30 human rights. They don't know what they are. How can they protect, defend, and demand their own human rights and the human rights of others if they don't know what they are? So you can learn about your 30 human rights in less than an hour. Go to youthforhumanrights.org to order your free info kit and get onto our mailing list. You can also teach others. Urge your friends and family to order their own free kits as well. We must make human rights a reality, and that starts with education in the 30 human rights. So order your free kit and get others to do so as well. And if you would like to find out how you can assist us here in Washington, D.C., in our Florida chapter, or any of our chapters around the world, please reach out to us via our Facebook page and let us know how you would like to volunteer. In closing, I'd like to say thank you to Christopher and Bernard for participating today and sharing your stories. I'd like to thank Youth for Human Rights Florida and for partnering with us and facilitating this event. Thank you, Sandra. Lastly, I would like to thank the DC Black History Celebration Committee for their support. So we're now going to take up some questions. So let's go ahead and bring our speakers back. Christopher and Bernard. Thank you. Okay, so the first question I have here is for Bernard. How did it go teaching gang members nonviolence, and how do we do that today with young people?
Well, one of the things that I had an advantage of here was that I'd been a gang leader in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Okay. And we participated in the boycott that Leon Sullivan started over bakeries because they didn't hire black folks. So it wasn't just something new for me. I was a gang leader, in fact. So I understood the way they think and the way they operate and the way they function with each other. And that's important. Take the information, the training and the skills that you already have and figure out a way that you can employ them to achieve the goal that you're trying to achieve. So I went in the alley with the gangs, for example, and Jesse Jackson talked to Lieutenant Nolan. So in other words, I didn't want the gang members to get shot or killed in confrontation with the policeman. And there was a black man, a tall black man of the Chicago Police Department, named Lieutenant Nolan. And Jesse Jackson was taller than most of us. And so I assigned him to talk to Nolan, just keep talking. And what Jesse Jackson was saying, don't shoot them. Don't shoot these young fellows, okay? And I was with the gang in the alley. So I was able to give them some direction. Said, no, don't go that way. The policeman lined up waiting for you. So let's go this way. So I took over the gang in the alley.
It's amazing. And, you know, it's so funny how a conversation can make such a huge difference, especially when you can relate to the person and you understand that anger and frustration that they're feeling and how violence is all that they have known to carry out how they're feeling. I actually pulled up this quote during your speech because it made me think about this, but this one, I just love this quote from Dr. King. And I must say tonight that a riot is the language of the unheard. And what is it America has failed to hear? It has failed to hear that the promises of freedom and justice have not been met. I just love that quote. And it's so true. You know, you think of people in gangs and violence and, you know, they don't feel heard. And that's how they know how to respond is to act out. But it's really good to know that there are some methods in place that can help people turn that violence and frustration into something productive. All right, my next question is for Christopher. Christopher, what are the main key initiatives that you know that have occurred in the past that can help us build a better future? Oh, you're muted.
Great question, Aaron. Thank you for the question. Key initiatives that I know from the past that can still help build a future or build a better future. One, I want to highlight, many of you may not know of, which was the Universal Declaration of Human Rights Treaty System. And this system was implemented under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights simply to idealize or help educate each individual compartment within the United Nations of how we educate and take care of people. And they created this manual, simply put, women, rights against women, rights in the workplace. I mean, they broke it down Barney style on how we as a people can target or utilize each individual human right in the workplace or in our social setting and system to be able to educate and train our own people in this manual. So that's one system that I think a lot of people miss out on. And it's simple. What Bernard, Mr. Lafayette had highlighted was the importance of education. And we as a culture of people, you know, we got to read more. we got to read a whole lot more because the information is there. It's put out there publicly for us. And then secondly, the NAACP is a platform that was put in place, and there are over 2,600 chapters. You know, me and my fellow president, Reverend Clyde Carter, for Pasco County here in Florida, we work hand in hand, as well as Upper Pinellas County, which is down there where my office actually is located for the Youth for Human Rights, United for Human Rights chapter in Clearwater, Florida. We work hand in hand there. And you have Harrisburg County president. Each local county, we work together, unified to combat issues, working with the sheriff's department in each prospective county, so people can do their initiatives locally by supporting the organizations that started in the past that are still in existence today, working hand in hand, utilizing the tools that were already there that are still present today, how we create a better future.
Awesome. I think this is a question for both of you, actually. You may, Christopher, be familiar with this as well, but this came in from Washington State. How can I read more about the gentleman Dr. King recruited? Do they have books out about this, as they are not in the history books? So I'm curious if either of you know of any books that we could recommend to her.
Well, yes. John Lewis's books would be certainly very valuable, you know, to you.
John Lewis?
John R. Lewis.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then Andrew Young. You know, his book would be very valuable, you know, to you and that kind of thing. So there are many books that are out, but they're not enough. There's also a book called The Children. That's very bad. And the Chicago Movement, Mary Lou Finley and some others.
Someone has some background noise happening. I think it's someone's cell phone that's dinging.
Yes, we're okay now.
Okay, good. Yeah. Sorry about that.
Yeah. So we have a few books that are out that have already been you know, published and that kind of thing, and gets. I'm sorry, I got to say this. You know, a native of Tampa, Florida, right, Kate, Christopher?
I live in the area of, but I've only been here about 10 years.
Okay, well, you know Bob Sanders, right?
I do.
Okay, well, I was a member of the NAACP, and I got my first card at age 11.
Wow. See,
okay.
You don't have to be an adult to join the NAACP. You can join as a child.
That's right. And our picture with Bob Sanders is in the public library there in Tampa, Florida.
In Harrisburg County. Yeah, it's in Seminole.
County, yeah. That's right.
It's in Seminole County Library. Yeah.
Yeah, and also in Tampa, right there on Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, right. Okay.
Where you at?
Yes. So I think that documentaries like the Nashville Sit-In Movement called White Paper and other kinds of CDs and stuff like that, a lot of the young people, instead of reading books, they listen to tapes and watch programs like this, you know, etc. So what you got to do is do the research and find out which leaders, you know, are interested in pursuing this information and how they go about doing it. Right. It's very important. Now, since you mentioned this, one of the things I want to advocate is a weekly youth leader television program.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yes, and it could be sponsored. There's no question about that. You find sponsors for that.
Oh,
Young
absolutely.
People, yeah, they'll pay for it. You know, people who sell tennis shoes and stuff like that.
That is a really good point. So I had a couple of other questions come in, and they're all pretty similar. And I actually think that both of you would appropriately answer this. But the main thought is, you know, what is something that we can do locally in our own town, in our own city, to, you know, bring better awareness or to make a difference today in our own communities? I love what you said, Bernard, about, you know, perhaps a weekly television program, especially for youth leadership. But I would be curious from both of you, you know, Bernard, why don't you start on what more people can do locally to get involved in their communities and making some changes?
The most important thing that we can do right now, I don't do these things. I train people. Okay? All right? So that way you get more, you double your efforts, okay? Results. We need to create a youth legislature, ages 12 to 17. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
That will duplicate the existing legislatures in the state now. Okay?
Okay.
And they could be done in where they go to school. So that'll be easier because they come together in a group where they come to school. But if you did it in their simply local areas, sometimes people go to school you know, they live in different areas, and so they live in different counties, and they live in different legislative districts and stuff like that. But the schools have districts, so you go by that school. So that's where they come together. You know, if they go to that school, that you're in that district.
Okay.
Okay. Then what they do is meet once a month, the ones that you elect. So all the students have the opportunity to elect someone to represent them from their legislative district in their school. Okay.
Yeah.
You have more than one school in the same, that's fine too. But the main thing is they have a chance to select the people who are going to represent them.
Mm.
They meet once a month, and one of the things they do is give a prize or a gift to a person who has gotten their voter registration card. Because see, every month, how many people turn 18?
Yeah. I have no idea.
Oh, that's my point. You know,
Yeah.
every day.
Yeah.
Okay. So that month, that they have an opportunity to get their voter registration card and come to that meeting. You get my point? That's how you get the
Absolutely.
audience. And they get a prize. That'd be one of the things that, so it's not a surprise, it's a prize. And they'll show up for their prize. Okay. All right. But the other thing you do is invite a elected official, okay, once a month, to come and talk to the students about what's going on in the government, what's in the legislature, what bills they're considering. And by the way, bills that they're considering in the legislature always have money attached to them. That's why they call them bills. Okay?
Yep.
Somebody gonna pay. Okay? Even though the students are not registered to vote yet, they gonna pay taxes. All right? So
Yeah.
that's taxation without representation. So my point is that the students who you elect will have the experience of being able to keep up with the legislation and the things that they're doing, so they'll be ready.
Yeah.
You know what it's like? I put it in short language, driver's education. If you're going to drive the country, okay,
Mm-hmm.
then you need some driver's education.
You know, I have never thought about it in those terms, but when you put it like that, it seems so obvious, you know, to start allowing kids as young as 12, you know, to start thinking about how our government really works, how legislation and bills are passed, and to start thinking about how they are involved in that by being a part of the society, because I don't think people figure that out until well into their 20s. Christopher, I don't know if you've noticed that, but for me, that's certainly apparent to me. Like, people are well into their 20s before they really realize that they're a member of society and that they have a say in what's going on.
So. And it's so true. You know, Bernard, he brought a lot of things to light, and living by example, and being accountable, you know, educating people. I tell people it's something as simple as attending your school board meetings. If you don't, you know, that local municipality is really what controls your life. Yes, you have this huge presidential election for the entire country, but people dissipate. They disappear when it comes down for State House of Representatives, your state senator, state congressman, your local judges, your local mayors and county commissioners, and your city commissioners. People dissipate. Some cities have aldermen, depending on the districts and how they're set up. But that local municipality is really what directly affects you as a homeowner, as a student, as a parent with children in school. If you're not attending these public meetings, you can go to a school board meeting and say, I, as a parent of so-and-so attending school such and such, do not agree with this new legislature. And you can have the floor and voice your perspective against any new educational curriculum being placed in that county. The power is in the voice. We all have a voice, but people have to understand when and where to execute it, how to execute it, because the opportunities are always there. But like Bernard said, we're just not active in those spaces, and we have to get more active. So I'm going to use this opportunity and that question as a call to action. You know, people understanding that we have those rights, and the right to education is a human right. So how about everybody who's watching today, go on youthforhumanrights.com or yourhumanrights.com and order yourself an educator's kit so it can be shipped directly to your house, and then we can hold more free seminars, train more people, because if we give you the kits, then we can train you on how to better support your own community. Myself or Bernard can travel and fly to get there and say, hey, we're here. Now who's ready for a class?
Bernard, he's volunteering your services. Well, one last question came through, and I think it's pretty apparent what the answer is, but it says, so books are valuable and should be appreciated and not burned. Would you guys agree with that?
Hands down, books are very valuable. Learning is power. Learning is not just knowledge, but information is priceless. People give information and they charge for information, but where can you get it? Books are not just printed anymore. Books are online. Books are on audio. You can put your earplugs in your ear and drive down the street listening to a book. It's not safe. Don't do that. Pay attention to the road. But at the same time, there's so many different platforms that we've moved from just the printed book where you can get information. So broaden your horizons, and yes, books are very important.
Absolutely. Yes. Bernard.
And I should have said that I'm the chairman of the board of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, because I want to make sure that Martin Luther King's organization continue to exist and have the same kind of impact. And our president, Dr. Charles Steele Jr., has done a tremendous job. And if you got a chance to go over there on Auburn Avenue in Atlanta and be able to see the building, okay, you would know that that's very important, and it still continues to exist. So we're here, and that's what I do, what I'm doing now.
I love it. Okay, so we've got one last, it's sort of a question, but it's more just, we'd like to hear someone would like to hear one individual success or win, something that each of you feel that has been accomplished that you're proud of in the work that you have done so far.
Christopher?
All right, I'll take the floor first. Considering the time where we are now with the gentleman's course, being able to use the instruction of etiquette and human trafficking prevention to incorporate human rights education and educate people on the difference between civil rights and human rights and how they are inclusively together. But using this platform, considering the time frame that we're in and what we've been through, to be able to now say we are educating police officers on human and civil rights and not just understanding what Miranda rights are. They now are being better equipped on civic engagement, community engagement, the understanding of community relationships. So coming into 2022, it's been a long fight, but this year we will be able to publicly say the listing of sheriff's office and city police departments that we are starting to train and have trained in human rights education. So we're on our way to creating a difference in how people engage people with the badge and the gun, but then also how our communities view officers now, knowing they do know when they say my rights are violated, they actually know what rights we're talking about.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now our loss is, we lose every day. We lose time every day. Opportunities we lose every day. So I don't regret any opportunity missed, any child missed. But I look at the next day as an opportunity to get them back and keep pushing forward.
Awesome.
Bernard?
There are smart men, and then there are dumb men. Smart men are the ones who recognize that women must be included in any organization or effort that you're trying to accomplish. And the reason why is because women have exceptional abilities that men don't have.
Focus.
You know why else, Christopher? Now watch this now, okay? And it's going to remind you of something, okay? Number one, women can carry on 3 conversations at the same time.
At the same time.
Yeah, I have 5 sisters. I just lost one, but hey, you know what? They carry up. I watch them and observe them, and when they try to talk to me, I usually say, "Could you just wait just a minute? Can't hear but one person at a time, one conversation at a time." They carry on 3.
3.
Okay, they'll multitask. In other words,
they talking, texting, and listening at the same time.
If they talk about jazz, if you turn women loose on jazz and be able to blend all those melodies together,
yeah,
hey, they'll be off the charts. All right, yeah. But you know what? It was only since I was in the graduate school at Harvard University that I figured it out. First, they have more nodules on their brain.
Yeah.
Number 2, they repeat themselves a lot.
So they can put it in their own.
Why they can talk. That's why they can carry on 3 conversations. Because they say it 3 times.
To themselves.
Oh my gosh, you guys are too funny.
Never try to accomplish anything in terms of any kind of goals or programs or changes in the whatever.
Without including
one. You have women in the leadership.
You got to have them. It is a must.
100%. I agree with that. And a lot of women were involved in pulling off this event today. It wasn't just us, believe me. And as the comments are coming in, I can see a lot of women are agreeing with you, Bernard. So thank you for that validation.
I wouldn't be sitting here right now if it wasn't for my niece.
Thank you so much, too, for being there, by the way. Oh, my gosh. You guys are so funny. Well, I think we're well over our time, so I'm gonna go ahead and wrap it up there. But I really want to acknowledge both of you. You guys have been fantastic, and I hope that we get to do this again sometime. Okay?
Look forward to it.
Look forward
absolutely, to it. Absolutely. Thank you so much, and thank you to the women in Bernard's life. Bye, everyone.